Hello, everyone. Sports Focus with 5 days to go until the start of the Premier League season. The transfer rumour mill is going through the gears ahead of facing Bournemouth, with the Reds linked to 2 big money striker bids and interest from Serie A in 2 of their own players. We'll continue our own build to new campaign in the company of, well, I was going to say, first of all, because Lewis McGugan was supposed to join us, but he's had to drop out at the very last minute due to internet problems. So, bailing me out for the second time this summer is TNT Sports commentator Adam Summerton. Adam, good to have you with us again. Hat-trick appearance. How are you doing?
I'm really good. Good to be here. Smash the glass for Summerton, is it, in a case of emergency?
Exactly. It was going to be the 3 of us chatting around transfers and the season ahead, but well timed with Adam here because there's some Serie A chat, obviously a lot of Premier League chat as well, and some striker chat in different leagues. We'll probably start with strikers. Forest linked with Vitor Roque, 19-year-old striker, who is set to leave Barcelona after a pretty miserable 6 months there, after a £30 million move from Brazil. Red hot scoring talent there, got 1 Brazil cap and can play across the front line. Bournemouth, Everton and Real Sociedad linked. And then the second striker is Evanilson, who's got 2 Brazil caps this year, 24 years old, 25 goals last season. Fabrizio Romano says we had a bid rejected. And again, Bournemouth are interested as they frantically search for a Dominic Solanke striker. I know you've seen a bit of Evanilson, Adam. So talk to us about him a bit and just the general principle that Forest aren't going for a free transfer or a loan here necessarily. They're going for someone who is obviously going to be a big part of the project and I guess pushing for a start from day one.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult position for them to be in, isn't it, in terms of the profile of the type of player that they go for, because they've got someone like Awoniyi. If he's fit and remains fit, he's somebody who I think we've not yet seen the best of, and I think could score a lot of goals this season. You've got someone like Chris Wood, who impressed quite a bit last season. We know the type of profile of player he is. So I'm interested to see the type of strikers that are being linked with. As I say, I wouldn't call myself an expert on Evanilson, but I've seen a bit of him playing in Europe. And what you would say about him is that he's got a really consistent record now in a league the standard of the Primeira Liga in Portugal. Now, how that would translate to the Premier League is always pretty difficult to predict. As I say, he's played some European football as well. He's good technically. I think there's still, I sometimes watch him and I still feel, even though he's now 24, there's still a little bit of a rawness to him. And I suppose you might get that with players who are playing at that level. I always compare say the Portuguese Primeira Liga with, say, the Eredivisie. That similar sort of, you're taking a bit of a punt when you sign a player from that level. Usually you'll get the odd one that's a bit of a solid bet. But yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because it's hard to know what money they've got, isn't it, in terms of what they can invest in a striker with the whole balancing the books and everything that goes with that. So it's difficult to know exactly the market that they're shopping in, I suppose, really, with this.
Yeah, I think we're talking about 25 million or so here for Roque. I was reading they spent 30 million on him. And like I was saying, it sounds like he's had a pretty stinking time in Barcelona, but they play a set way. It's different to the way Forest play, and he's very, very raw. The fact he's had a bad time in Barcelona, do you read anything into that for a 19-year-old striker other than that he's probably a long way off a finished product, but the talent's there, I guess?
Yeah, well, and I think to somebody like Ansu Fati, who of course was being regarded as one of the premier young talents in world football, and of course he had a difficult time there as well, and came to Brighton, and I suppose you could say flattered to deceive as well. It's a difficult environment in which to make it at Barcelona, isn't it? I think the mentality of a player in those circumstances is so important. And obviously, Barcelona are a club who've had their problems off the pitch. And there's been a lot of lever pulling, is I think the phrase that was used in terms of how they've been quite creative to get players in. It's so I'm not always sure that environment right now is great for a young player. So it might be a little bit harsh to judge him on that, but it would feel like a little bit of a punt in terms of, you're bringing in a very young player already, someone who's had a pretty difficult experience at a major club, and how they would come in and whether they would be a starter. Could they establish themselves at a club like Forest, who already have, let's remember, 2 very good forwards? But I think the Forest fans will want to see another one come in, I would imagine. I think that would still be a major priority ahead of the window closing.
Yeah, Nathan Joyce, who's a friend of the show from the Copper Club, was very excited when we were linked with Roque earlier today. So he said he thought it was more exciting than Murillo. So a lot of big talent there. The other thing I just wanted to ask about it and raise was Bournemouth and Everton are the Premier League sides linked, and Fulham, I think I might have seen linked with one of them. It kind of shows that the bracket of the table we're still shopping in, I guess. These players aren't quite Arsenal, Liverpool, top 6 level. We're kind of competing in, hopefully, that's kind of second, third of the league or above the relegation zone clubs.
Well, I remember when you got me on to talk about Milenkovic when he was signed from Fiorentina, and I would argue that I think you actually asked me this at the time before I knew that Forest were interested. What profile of Premier League club would I have thought he would have been linked with? And my answer to you was clubs like Villa, Tottenham, that kind of profile of clubs. So I felt that was a really ambitious signing by Forest to bring in Milenkovic. I think he could prove to be a real steal at the price that they've paid for him. And he's the sort of signing as well that can help raise the level collectively. I think he'll improve the unit that he plays in, that defensive unit, but I think it could potentially raise the level of the team. And I suppose other players will look at them signing somebody like a Milenkovic, who admittedly didn't have his best season for Fiorentina last season, but his whole body of work in Italy, I thought, by and large, and from what I've seen of him with Serbia as well, is impressive. And I think he's somebody who's got a lot of European experience as well. And that was a signal. It felt like a signal of intent to me from Forest when they made that signing. I should also say as well that the players that they've kept this summer is another maybe. I mean, I know the window isn't closed yet, but keeping players like Murillo and Gibbs White, I think, is a signal of intent from Forest and the owners that they want to just do more than just survive this season. And that's got to be the objective going forward, I guess.
Just one last one on strikers, the ones we've got already. It's Taiwo's, as we record this, late Monday afternoon. So other names could be linked by the time this comes out for first thing in the morning. It's Taiwo's 27th birthday today. So happy birthday. That entering that kind of peak years of your career feels like a big season for him with his injury record, doesn't it?
It is a big season for him, and I think we've seen more than enough to suggest that he's capable of scoring plenty of goals in the Premier League. That's when we were starting the conversation talking about other players who come in. You just think to yourself, would that, somebody coming in from who's on the fringes at Barcelona, they're going to want to come in and they're going to want to get regular football. Now, if Awoniyi is fit and playing to his best, those opportunities might be a little limited, mightn't they? So, but as you say, I mean, the fitness is the key thing. I like it, the fact that they've got a different profile of striker with somebody like Woods can play very differently, so they can mix it up. But I still think they do need a little bit more. But you're right to say it's a big season for him. It's exciting for him as well because he's done enough, surely, in his own mind to say, I can live at this level. He's done well in Germany. Obviously, was with Liverpool originally. He's gone to Germany, has built up his reputation there, and has come to the Premier League. And were it not for those injuries, I think we'd have seen him. I think he'd have an even higher profile right now than he actually does. So we'll see how he does this season.
Yeah, I agree. He's one of those few strikers who's got it all. He's got the pace, the power. There was a spell at the end of the season where we stayed up. The first season, we stayed up both, where he looked like he was never going to miss. He was scoring left, right, and centre. If he can get back to that, then he actually, I think, is a top 6 striker. It's just like he just can't stay fit. So yeah, big season for him. Just before we move on, we'll take an early advert for the Trent Navigation and thank them for their support because it leads us on to another conversation around the players Danilo and Williams who are linked with moves away. First game of the season is coming up against Bournemouth, but the second home game of the season against Wolves sees the return of Oasis into the Nav. The gig is free to get in, and obviously there's barbecue on offer and throughout the food court, inside bars and outside bars. It was really good last time, so get down to that post Wolves pretty much straight after the final whistle. So enjoy that one, and thanks for their support. And obviously, like I say, Bournemouth is on the horizon, so do enjoy that as well. Last time you were on, I spent about 2 weeks plugging pizzas at the Nav. Were you on when I was asking everyone their favourite pizza?
No, I wasn't.
Good. Well, I know that you're a connoisseur of Italy. I know you cover Italian football, and I think you've been there this summer. So I'll revisit it. I'll throw it back because Italian pizzas are cut above everything else. The Nav have got pizzas on offer on Wednesdays. What is your pizza of choice?
It would probably be, I think it's pronounced Diavolo, is it? It's
Okay.
basically the devil. It's a pizza that's, it's a little bit spicy, it's got a bit of salami on, that kind of thing. Yeah. And that's how you pronounce it. But yeah,
Nice.
that would probably be my pizza of choice.
We've had some interesting answers as we progress along. I know Dan Story had an interesting one. We had a lot of margaritas Asari, and we've raised the bar consistently, like a good team pushing through pre-season. We peaked with a week to go.
A tip for anyone who does go to Italy: don't order or ask for. Don't order because it wouldn't be on the menu, but don't ask for a ham and pineapple pizza.
That's frowned upon, is it? That's a British thing.
Or cappuccino after 11 o'clock.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
You get some looks if you order a cappuccino after 11.
Nice. What's an Italian breakfast? I always go off on a tangent. Sorry. What's an Italian breakfast?
Good Italian breakfast.
What are they eating? Cold meats and stuff like that.
Well, it's got to involve cappuccino. In fact, when I was there, I was at Lake Garda a couple of weeks ago, and I was having 2 cappuccinos a morning. So cappuccino mainly. I'm not sure. I don't know. And I was having croissants, but I suppose you'd say that's French, wouldn't you? But
yeah,
I'm not sure. I always just associate an Italian breakfast with cappuccino, but not much else. I mean,
that says more about you.
A lot of people there just live off espresso, I think. To be honest.
Okay. There you go. Right, back to football and kind of connecting with Italy. As I said, Danilo and Neco Williams. We discussed this on yesterday's podcast. Today, as I recall this again, Danilo linked with Milan, AC Milan. Neco linked with Atalanta. Just probably starting with Danilo. I mean, what is it that Milan are looking for? Are you surprised they're going for him? Does he fit the mold of player they need from what you've seen?
No, I'm not surprised that they would be interested in him. He fits the profile, really, of the type of player that they've been looking for this summer. It's a position that has been highlighted by the Italian media right throughout the summer that Milan would look to strengthen in. And I think he would be a really good signing, actually, for Milan. Obviously, the fee would be a key area of this in terms of whether a deal could get done. I suspect that Forest fans would probably rate him and value him at a higher level than maybe Milan are willing to pay or have the money to pay. So that could be interesting. That could be a big stumbling block for me. But in terms of the profile of the type of player, I think he would tick a lot of boxes for Milan as to where they are right now. I think from a Forest perspective, I'd be pretty surprised if they were to let him go. I'm not going to sit here and say that I think that we've seen the best of him in the Premier League, but that in a way is the reason why I say I'd be surprised if they let him go, because I think he's got a much higher ceiling to go to than we've seen so far. I think Forest fans would probably agree. I don't know, you're better placed than I, but and they'll probably agree that we've seen glimpses of the type of player that or the type of level that he's ultimately capable of going to. I saw that before he even came to England when he was playing in Brazil. I saw little bits of him and I thought there's a real player there. And I just think that I know he's had, a season and a half now in England. And I think they paid, was it around 20 million for him? I think you would probably say that his value's gone up, but maybe not considerably. I would say that it has gone up. But I just feel like he's somebody that Forest just need to maybe have a little bit more patience with. He's still only 23. I really like him. I still really like him. I still think that he can do well for Forest. And I hope from a Forest perspective that they keep him. But I do think that he could work out quite well for Milan if they can get the right price. And that, as I say, might be difficult.
Yeah, Manchester United also mentioned as possible contenders. And as I said yesterday, anything over 11.5 million is a PSR profit, which you have to bear in mind. I do think he's like not our best all-round midfielder, but he's the one who's got the most all-round skill set. And like you say, Adam, probably seen 60 minutes in a game or 3 games in a row of playing really well, and then he'll just drop off. But he's always trying to be positive and always trying to impact games. Perhaps rarely takes a safe option. So, yeah, I think there's more to come, and it'd take a big bid for me to think it's worth doing it. Like 35 million, 30 million would be the baseline for him. Neco's the other one that's interesting. Atalanta, winners of the Europa League. So being a Champions League, looking at Neco for Forest report, you want 25 million for him, and Atalanta offered about 17, which is roughly what we paid for him. So again, anything over 8 million is a profit. Talk to us about Atalanta and why they might be interested.
Well, Atalanta, I mean, if for anyone who watched the Europa League final last season, it was an absolute masterclass of a tactical performance led by Gasperini, who was rumoured would leave in the summer, having delivered the Europa League, which was just a stunning achievement for a club the size of Atalanta until he arrived there, known really very much as a provincial club. But he's taken them to a completely different level, back in the Champions League again now. And for somebody like Neco Williams, I've got to say, I mean, if I were in his shoes, and this is no reflection on Forest, but purely as if you're a footballer who wants to try something different, I think that would be a fantastic experience for him. I really do. Of course, we've seen Godfrey go there this summer as well from the Premier League. And Gasperini is somebody who I think players tend to have mixed views on him because he's not. When you read interviews with players who played under him, I remember Castagna, who was at Leicester. I remember reading one with him where he said one of the reasons he left Atalanta was because he responded best to a manager who was a good man manager, somebody who'd put their arm with you, share a joke with you. But Gasperini is quite cold and just very tactical and sees his players almost as sort of chess pieces to move around and maybe takes the personality out of it a little bit. But so it's. He's very much a system manager as well, Gasperini. So you've got to fit into that, and you've got to be it can be quite rigid in what he's expecting you to do in the side. So all those things considered, I think it would be an attractive move for him. Obviously, Champions League football goes without saying. That's something that's going to be attractive to a player as well. But from a Forest perspective, I suppose I would have similar feelings to what I do with Danilo. I think I'm right in saying they're the same age, aren't they? Is it 20,
Yeah, they're both
23?
23.
Yeah, they're both the same age. And I both feel that they're players that are capable of being part. This is just my opinion. I think they're both capable of being part of a Forest squad that does go to the next level. A club that isn't just trying to survive, that can be looking to move up the table. I do think they're two players who could be part of that. But again, we have to bring in factors like having to balance the books. And we simply don't know, where they are with that and how important it is that they cash in on players like this, and whether it's not even a case of wanting to sell players like Williams and Danilo. They simply have to balance the books and be creative in terms of who they can then fund to bring in. So a lot of clubs are in a similar position right now, aren't they? They're having to maybe sell players that they don't necessarily want to, but they have to in order. I mean, we've seen that in Italy as well. I mean, Juventus, as big a name as them, I mean, they're a great example of that right now. I mean, for anyone who doesn't know, really, this summer, Juventus have sold off a lot of their future prospects to fund the present and sign players like Thuram and Douglas Luiz and Coat Miners, who I'm not sure if that's over the line yet, but players who are very much for the now rather than perhaps future prospects. So Forest are certainly not alone in that respect. But I think Forest fan, I don't know, again, you're a better place than that, but I think they'd be a little bit disappointed, wouldn't they, to see players like Williams and Danilo leave? Because it's almost like one step forward, and then when you bring in someone in like a Milenkovic, you can raise the level, and then you're thinking, well, these players could be part of that too. And then they go, and you think, well, where does that overall, does that take you back to where you were in the first place? I don't know. It's obviously we would see as the season goes on, but as I say, I think both those players, it would be a shame from a Forest perspective if they were allowed to leave, but both would do well in Italy, in my view.
It's difficult. You want continuity, don't you? Because when you said about keeping them as part of the project, I would. Obviously, the thing is, how do you use the money? Does it bring in a potentially better player? But you don't want to be ripping up the team every season. So I think they could be players who grow with the project. So I'd be loath to lose both of them. I'm not sure if it'll happen. I know Fabrizio Romano tweeted that Neco's on Atalanta's shortlist. I mean, the fact that Milan and Atalanta are looking at these players, maybe even more so Atalanta, because it feels like they can identify rough diamonds like Lookman and players like that. Does it show that Forest are probably in the right direction? It's sort of a good thing that clubs are taking notice of our players.
I think that's a very good point. I mean, Gasperini is somebody who's incredibly shrewd, and as you say, I mean, if you look even at somebody like, it's very sad, he's out now for about 6 to 9 months, Scamacca, with an injury, but he's somebody who Gasperini seems to have got into the head of, put him in a system where it worked for him, and in the second half of last season, he was absolutely outstanding, and Gasperini has a real track record, as you say, along with the sporting director there. They managed to get players at relatively low prices and really develop them. This is not 100% success rate by any means, but what he's so clever at is that he manages to put them into his system. And that's why, sometimes they might be linked with players who on the face of it, you look at it and you think, that's a bit of a left field, what's all that about? And then you think, well, it's because Gasperini will be looking at the profile of the player in terms of how he fits him into his system, not necessarily. So it's very much a system coach, and it can work the other way in that with Gasperini, I always say be careful when you sign a Gasperini player, because when you take them out of his coaching and out of his system, sometimes they can look a little bit lost because they're so used to the demands of what he wants. And yeah, it can be difficult for players who leave. But it's a good point that you raised, that if he's looking at a player, you'd have to think there's certainly something about them, and we know that from what we've seen of both Danilo and Williams. They're good footballers.
Just let's talk about the Premier League then in a wider sense. It's good to have you on, because I was thinking, like, everyone who comes on this podcast generally, apart from Seb Hutchinson, is either a Forest fan or played for Forest. So I know you've got Nottingham connections and a fondness for Nottingham, but you're more neutral than everyone else who comes on. So I saw earlier today Opta's supercomputer, whatever that is.
Oh yeah.
Opta are good. Opta, yeah, they're the main football stats people. They predicted the table point projections with, just out of curiosity, City to win the league, a top four of Arsenal, Liverpool, and Chelsea. I don't think that Chelsea one I don't get at all. But then the bottom three would be the promoted teams. They've got us 17th. So the point is they've got Forest again finishing 17th, with Wolves, Bournemouth, Brentford, Everton, and Fulham in that bracket. Interestingly, Palace, they have finishing 9th. What do you think about that? Obviously, Forest fans are more ambitious than that. Is that fair? Is it a disaster to be predicted to finish 17th?
I see Forest as, I think they should be aiming higher than that. I mean, I think the goalkeeper I thought did really well when I watched him. I saw them a few times in the second half of last season. I like him. You look at the potential partnership of Milenkovic and Murillo, and the fact that Milenkovic, with his skill set, solves, or you would hope certainly contributes to solving, a lot of the very obvious defensive problems there were for Forest last season, most notably on set pieces. I think there's decent amount of cover and competition for places in the fullback positions. You look into the midfield, and if they keep someone like Danilo, I know Yates is staying as well. There's others we could mention as well. The signing from Newcastle, Anderson, coming in too, is a very good player. I think that's another signing that shows ambition. You've got Gibbs White, who I have to say I thought may well leave this summer, but it looks as though he's going to stay, and he's somebody who certainly provides a lot of X factor. You've got players who suit the way that they want to play in the wide positions, with somebody like Hudson-Odoi, and Elanga as well, who I think again can go to a higher level. Another one of the summer signings who's come in as well is Jota Silva from Portuguese football, who, let's see what we get from him. But I just look at through the Forest squad, and I really do think that they should be aiming higher than. I'm not saying, look, that it's going to be a squad challenging for European football, but I do think that if they could have a really good season, they could be lower mid-table. I don't see that that's way beyond the realms of possibility. Although that said, the Premier League is going to be very, very competitive this season, as it always is. We'll see what a new club like Ipswich can do. Haven't played at the Premier League level for a long time, and they've got a fantastic manager there. We've got Russell Martin at Southampton as well. I'm less confident about Leicester, because I think they're going to be a little bit hamstrung with the financial side of things, and they could well suffer a points penalty as well. There's a bit of a cloud over them, isn't there? But yeah, I think I would, if I were a Forest fan, I would be looking at thinking higher than 17th. Yeah. What about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I think higher, not massively higher, like 14th or 15th. I think I agree with everything you said. I'd throw Sangare onto the list as well, because he's had such a good pre-season. And if he really fronts up as a proper number 6, then I think he makes a big difference. But yeah, I don't want to get carried away and go wild. I think 14th or 15th is a really good season, because there's other teams that have lost big name players. Look at Bournemouth and Solanke, and how that hurts them. Wolves and Neto, Fulham and Polinia. We had Palace and Elise. We haven't done that yet, and Brentford and Tony potentially. So that gives me a lot of hope. I mean, when you look at the bottom of the league, then are you just looking at the promoted teams? Because there is a big gap, I think, between the Championship and the league still.
It's something that I'm noticing more and more each year now, is that it just feels like that gap is just more and more significant. And you do have to fear for them. I mean, but clubs can surprise you. I mean, I remember this time last year thinking I was worried about Wolves, and you look at what they ended up doing, and they were nowhere near it in the end, were they? So teams can surprise you, but I think it's difficult at this stage to look too far beyond the the promoted clubs, and it's more difficult now because of all the. It's such a big topic of conversation, isn't it? The PSR rules, whatever you want to call them, the financial situation that a lot of clubs find themselves in. It's that bit more difficult now, isn't it, for clubs? Even if they do have potentially the money to spend, it's so much more difficult now for clubs coming up. They can't just throw a load of money at it. They've got to balance the books. So it's incredibly difficult to now. And that's why I remember saying to you at the back end of last season, for Forest to stay up last season was absolutely huge for the club. Huge, not just in terms of that one season of staying up, because I felt that it was so important for the whole future direction of that football club, because it's so hard now to get yourself established back in the Premier League. It's very, very difficult. So for Forest to get through that second season, I just think was so important, because now it gives you the chance to go again and try and build towards a lower mid-table or a mid-table finish. And then maybe if you can do that, you can then maybe start to look to be on the fringes of the European places. And I was very interested to see the signings, that the type of profile of signings that Forest would make this summer, as to whether it would be signings that you would expect a side who just seek to avoid relegation would make, or whether they would be signings that are looking to go to the next level. And I would suggest, in my opinion, signings like Elliot Anderson, and particularly, as I know a lot more about, I've seen a lot of him, Milenkovic, I would say they are very much the profile of signings that suggest a club that thinks they can go now to upper rung in terms of the quality of where they expect to finish in the Premier League.
Yeah, I think so. And obviously we know the the owner's like super ambitious, so I'm sure he thinks that way. When you look at the other teams around there, you mentioned Wolves. I kind of look at Wolves again this season, to be honest. Like Neto's gone, Kilman's gone. They haven't signed any stellar names, which is fine, because Forest haven't signed any stellar names either, so I don't know too much about them. And then Everton, stuff like they could run out of money in October. I actually think they've done good business, but there's cases to be made for all those teams to struggle, I think, down there. Are you looking at any in particular who you think could get dragged in? Still a long way to go in the window, obviously.
Yeah, it is so difficult to predict at this time, because I still think there's going to be quite a bit of business done. In fact, so much so that I'm holding off doing my fantasy team right now, because I'm thinking I'm not sure it's a good idea to do that right now. I'm running out of time on that one. I'll have to do it this week, obviously, but yeah, I'm as before I came on to talk to you, I was looking through the business that the clubs have been doing, and I think we've mentioned a lot of them. I mean, Leicester, as I say, I mean they've lost some. Obviously losing their manager and losing Dewsbury Hall as well. I mean, they're two big holes to fill, aren't they? They were so important to them last season. There's obviously a different style of play coming in now in the new manager as well. So we'll see how all that adjusts. But I would probably have them among the favourites to go down. A lot of people are saying that people who've watched a lot more of Ipswich than I have say they think Ipswich could surprise one or two. So I haven't been a huge watcher of the Championship. I've always got my eyes on a lot of the leagues. So I don't cover that league professionally. But people who've watched a lot of it seem to think that they could surprise one or two people. And I think that's great for the league if you get a team that comes up and does that does ruffle a few feathers. And of course, they've got Liverpool, haven't they, on the early kickoff on the Saturday on this opening weekend. So, I memean, Fulham have lost what was a real key figure in their midfield for me in João Palhinha, who's finally got that move to Bayern, hasn't he? Because they've been looking at him for a long time. So that's a very sizable gap to fill. I thought he performed. You could argue that he was their most important player, actually, in terms of what he brought to the team and his significance to the team. So that'll be difficult for them to fill that gap. But they've got someone, I mean, he's a totally different player, but someone like Smith Rowe raises the quality when he comes in from Arsenal as well. But I think Fulham might get sort of I'd be surprised if they would play to the level they did last season, losing Palhinha, but someone else could emerge. You never know.
I was the guest yesterday was David Prutton and Luke Chambers, who used to play for us and Ipswich, and they see a lot of EFL. And Luke was like, I thought he'd be quite bullish about Ipswich's chances, but he was pretty. He was saying he thought they could finish 14th, and because of McKenna, and he's got a team that's greater than some of its parts. So obviously the Premier League can be a shock to the system. So we'll see. Because like you say, they've got Liverpool, then they've got City, so they're going to be probably on 0 points from 2 games.
Baptism of fire, that is, isn't it?
Exactly. But maybe it's good to play them first and,
get it out
the pressure off and, learn the level. And, it's only going to get easier from there. So, that was interesting. I mean, if I was to push you for a team that could kind of emerge from the pack that you kind of like the look of like. I mean, I think Spurs are going to have a really good season. Is there anyone in the table that you think actually they've done really good business and they could be the breakout team?
Yeah, there is the team for me that I look at because I already rated them and rated their prospects, but the summer that they have had West Ham, I just think that I'm really impressed with some of the business that they've done. I think Max Kilman is a lovely footballer, a really technically gifted player, very solid defender. I know that he's cost them a lot of money, but I think that could well be money well spent. Fulcro coming in is somebody who I think I said to you before we came on here, he just has that feel of a player, particularly at a club like West Ham as a centre forward. He could be like a real cult hero type player. Real barnstorming centre forward, isn't he? And I think he could be. I mean, obviously he's not a spring chicken by any means. I think he's 31, but so I've seen him doing it in the Champions League. We obviously saw him do it in the Euros in the summer. They brought in Somerville as well. Todibo is a player who a lot of clubs were interested in, who they brought in from Nice. And French football, as you'll know, is just such a great breeding ground for footballers. I think they call it. I think the league call themselves the League of Talents, and it's great the way that they branded themselves as that, because we've seen so many, haven't we, come through that league and go on and be a success. We'll see whether he can do that. So they'll have Kilman and probably Todibo as their centre halves. There's, I don't know, is the Wan-Bissaka deal done or not? I'm not sure if that's been done yet.
I think it's all close to being done. I think he passed a medical. That's a good sign for 15 million as well, I think.
Yeah, because then if you look at in front of that, you've got players of the quality of Paquetá and Alvarez, Somerville and Bowen on the flanks. You've got a lot of quality in that final third as well. And I just think I look at West Ham and think they could be a side who, look, I'm not sitting here saying that they're going to win the league, but I think if they could have a really good season, and there's no doubt that they've shown a lot of ambition. They've got to be one of the biggest spenders in the Premier League this summer. And Villa are another side who've spent quite a lot of money, but having said that, they've recouped quite a bit as well. But West Ham have really shown a lot of ambition. I wonder what David Moyes thinks, because often, during his tenure, it was they don't spend any money, they're not showing enough ambition, and then of course he leaves having delivered that first trophy in decades for them, and suddenly the purse strings have been loosened even more. But certainly in terms of ambition, I think West Ham has shown quite a bit.
And it's interesting you said that, because whenever we're linked with a player earlier this season, it's always West Ham have looked at him as well. So that's quite interesting. We're swimming in that sort of pond. But yeah, I agree. I think West Ham are well set. I think there's a few teams that are quite interesting. Like, I don't think Villa are going to be quite as good just because of playing in the Champions League and stuff like that. It's going to be an interesting season. Like I said, Chelsea are a bit of a basket case. I saw Chelsea have got over 50 pros on their books. It reminds me of Barry Fry when he was Birmingham manager. If you were of the same sort of age, but yeah, insane, isn't it? I think.
It is, and that is the difficulty that they're always going to have. And I don't really care who the manager is, who the coach is, whatever title they're given. When you have that many players on your books, all with egos, all whom expect to start, expect to be playing regularly, it's exceptionally difficult. And that was the crazy thing for me, is that despite all of that and the incredibly difficult circumstances that Pochettino had and inherited last season, I actually thought that he was showing signs of actually moulding some sort of semblance of an actual team. So for him to then leave and then a new guy come in with a new philosophy, a new way of playing, obviously will want to bring his own players in too. I mean, Neto, look, on the face of it, someone like Neto, I really rate Neto. If he could stay fit, I think he could be a really exceptional talent. Obviously, he struggled to stay fit, but again, you look at it, you think, well, they've got so many of these players that will all expect to be in there, and surely they've got to shift a few. But I just think they're so difficult to predict what will happen with Chelsea. If you told me right now that they finished in the top four, I would say, well, if you look at the players they've got, that's not really that surprising. But if you said to me they missed out on Europe entirely, I don't think that would surprise me either. I mean, it's just so difficult to predict how it will go with Chelsea. It's how quick Maresca can establish some kind of team, isn't it? And they've not had a great pre-season.
No, they've looked absolutely rubbish. Talking of fantasy leagues, and I've not got any Chelsea players in my. Actually, I might have one, but they're a team. Yeah, they're a team I bet against. I think quite early on, they look like they're set for interesting times, certainly. Right, as ever, if people have enjoyed that, do us a favour and hit like on the video. Makes a big difference to getting more eyeballs on it. Do subscribe as well. That's a big help, and give us a lovely review on iTunes. Once again, Adam, thanks again for bailing me out and stepping in to do us a good turn. What have you got on the horizon? I saw you tweeted you're going to be a busy man this season.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it because I've had quite a long break this summer, so which was very deliberate. Last season was a long one, but yeah, really excited. I'm going to be doing the Italian football on Sunday nights again. So the first one for that is Sunday. It's Cagliari Roma, and then I'll just be working primarily across TNT Sports rights, so I'll be pretty much every night, I think, on Champions League, Europa League, Conference League, all across the European competitions. I'll be doing some Premier League games as well. Hopefully get this to the City Ground like I did last season for the Fulham game. I really enjoyed being at the City Ground. And I was home within like 20 minutes as well, which was absolutely brilliant. So yeah, I'll just be across all the output at TNT, really. So really looking forward to what's to come. So I think it could be a really exciting season.
You're the lucky charm. If you were the Fulham game was like, we were absolute mustard that game. So yeah,
they were really good. Yeah, really good. Because I remember coming away from it and I was thinking to myself, because I'd not obviously covering lots of different teams and leagues. I was thinking to myself, if Forest play like that every week, they shouldn't be anywhere near the relegation zone. There were so many good performances that night. In fact, funnily enough, Danilo, who we've talked quite a bit about today, he was one of those, wasn't he? That day, who really stepped up. I thought Gibbs White was absolutely brilliant, wasn't he? That day. So if they can hit those kind of levels more often this season, and that game was memorable as well. It's jogging my memory now for that. Silva took off. Was it 3 players all in one go?
Yeah, in the first half, wasn't it? Yeah,
I've never seen that before.
No, well, yeah, it's like I'd say, not seen it. Yeah, like you said, I've never seen that before. So yeah, that was our best performance in the Premier League, I would say. So yeah, let's see a lot more of that hopefully this coming season. Just one thing from me, or a couple of things. Back tomorrow with the usual pre-season predictions show. See how badly we say Forest will do, or how badly we get it wrong, should I say? And then a quick shout out for the Footprints charity. They are doing a last man standing where you predict a winner for the week. I'm so bad at these. Have you done a last man standing where you just literally pick 8? Oh, all you have to do is pick a team that's going to win their fixture, and I always go out in the first round, pick like what looks like an absolute banker, like Liverpool Ipswich, and then Ipswich will draw or something. But anyway, if you want to be involved in that in aid of Footprints, there's a 50-50 split between the winner and Footprints for the cash. Just dig out on Twitter or X. I hate Twitter and X so much at the moment. Anyway, at _Dan White, Dan White, WHITE. Drop him a message and you can get involved in that. Right, Adam, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
We shall be back. Well, if I'm ever in trouble, I'll just drop Adam a message, so he might be back here very soon. But in general, we'll be back.
Phone.
Exactly. We'll be back. We're back throughout the week, all the way till post-match show on Saturday. So hopefully have your company for that. If we don't see you tomorrow, we shall see you soon.